Welcome to Innovation Summit North America 2021. I'm Adrian Thomas, and I'm the country president for Schneider Electric Canada. We're here in Toronto to talk about business leadership and how it can drive towards a net zero future. I'm joined today for this conversation with Toby Heaps from Corporate Knights and with Frances Edmond from HP Canada. Toby is the CEO and co-founder of Corporate Knights and spearheaded the beginning of the Global 100 Most Sustainable Companies list. Frances is the Sustainability Impact Leader at HP Canada. She has a passion for teaching about sustainability and has been twice recognized as a Clean 50. So welcome both of you to our discussion. Frances, I'd like to start with you. I know your company is making great strides in sustainability. Can you talk to us about some of the activities that you're driving at HP?
Sure, thank you, and great to be here today. So by 2030, we aim to be the most sustainable and just technology company, along with 50% absolute value chain reductions and a 75% product and packaging circularity rate. And not forgetting the human side of this, we have a goal of 50% of women in management. So those are pretty big, audacious goals. But it's nothing new for HP. We've been doing this for about 80 years from our founding fathers, really setting the scene as a purpose-driven company by saying that the real reason HP exists is to make a difference. So we've been focusing on these historical goals and our new goals, and obviously the next 8 years are absolutely critical. Just like everybody else in the audience, we really need to be focusing on these goals. So a couple of things that will help people here think about this. Over the last 2 years, we've recorded over $1 billion of business as a result of our sustainability leadership. So that should give everybody in the audience here hope that there's good business to be had out of this. But a couple of key things play into it. One is transparency in setting clear goals and then reporting on how you're doing against those goals. And then some recognition in the market. And this is where Toby and the wonderful Corporate Knights Global 100 comes in. Simply put, you cannot be a sustainable company without being transparent. And the kind of work that the Global 100 do to bring forward that transparency and recognize and celebrate it is just amazing.
Thank you, Frances. Toby, I'd like to kind of play that back to Corporate Knights and your Global 100 Index. In 2021, Schneider Electric was at the top of your Corporate Knights Global 100 Index for most sustainable companies, something that we're very proud of and we take seriously. We have a responsibility to share with others and help companies on their path forward for sustainability. Toby, I'd like to ask you, what inspired you to put this list together?
So we believe business can be a force for good and that markets can work to make the world better, but you need good information and incentives for that to work. And so the Global 100 is an attempt to put in one simple page the big companies that are leading the way to a more sustainable world. And the idea is that their employees will feel proud. It will help to reinforce the progress the company is making. It'll be an example that other companies want to fit into. Customers will perk up, and it will be a bit of a calling card of excellence that you can trust this company. 85% of value of companies is now intangible value. A large chunk of that is reputation. A large chunk of that is sustainability leadership. So a sustainability mark of excellence can be worth billions of dollars for a company. The Global 100 is just a synthesizer, a transparent synthesizer of that. It's really the company performance that is at the heart of it. And then the other part is investors. And this is the interesting thing. Since we started the Global 100 in 2005, we've been tracking the investment performance of the index. It's sector neutral, it's global, and it's handily outperformed other ESG indices that are not that transparent. More importantly, it's steadily outperformed its benchmark, the MSCI All Country World Index of blue chip companies. And so over 18 years, the Global 100 companies have stood the test of time and outperformed. And on average, the Global 100 companies live twice as long as the normal company that would be in a blue chip index. So we're seeing the good companies also turn in the better performance, which is something that gives me a lot of faith that this is a trend that has legs.
And certainly I can tell you in our company, this is a huge source of pride for employees and makes them want to do more and drive more for sustainability. And I think this kind of concept of transparency and a credible source is very important. And maybe we could get some comments from Frances in terms of business models and services. And I think this is another place where we've seen HP kind of redefine business models to create business and also to improve sustainability. Can you share a little bit around that?
Sure. So, a couple of things as part of our circular economy strategy, keeping materials in use for as long as possible, we have really identified that offering services is the key way to drive that. The footprint reductions across all categories of the life cycle assessments are pretty impressive. So, helping our customers actually buy as a service is one of the things that we've really identified as a necessary thing. And today, my job is really to change how Canada buys with the emphasis on circular and sustainable procurement. A couple of other things that we've done is to really think about our full value chain. Historically, supply chain responsibility was really an upstream activity, and we've been at it for quite a few decades. But in the last year, we have actually started to look at our downstream value chain and launched a program called Amplify Impact that actually takes HP's thousands of partners, literally thousands of partners around the world, and gives them free access to sustainability tools, metrics, and tips and tricks and hints, and basically takes them from having low to middling sustainability programs to really pumping out their sustainability prowess. So, investing heavily to help other businesses also start on their sustainability journey. It's a very critical piece that large corporations can play.
Yeah, I think, and there, I think you're talking really about how companies that have knowledge and information and leadership in sustainability can help others come along on this journey. Not everyone is in at the same place of this journey. So, back on the Global 100 Index, do you see that this index is also pushing companies to learn and to do more around sustainability? Maybe you could talk maybe what you hear and how you've seen this have an impact.
Yeah, that's the whole objective of it, is we want to sort of reinforce momentum and also create an incentive for companies who don't make the Global 100 to want to try and get on the Global 100. And now we engage with thousands of people from all over the world representing large companies who want to present their data and make sure that it's getting properly calibrated. And what we see is the companies that make the Global 100, there's all sorts of great things that happen to them. And it really does help to reinforce the positive momentum. We see their employees being proud, not because some third party said, hey, you're a sustainability leader, but because some third party said that, and they know it's true because of their on-the-ground reality and experience with the company. Because we're measuring things that matter, and we're doing it with a pure intention to really find things that matter for sustainability, and we're doing it transparently so people can see. And when people look under the hood, they have a sense of confidence that this isn't just another sort of list for hire or for sale. It's a credible, rules-based, transparent methodology. We see investors flocking to Global 100 companies. We've heard stories from some of the Global 100 company CEOs telling us that a third of their investor base over the last 5 years has shifted their long-term conviction shareholders, where those shareholders are in that company now because it's a sustainability leader. And part of that the credo of the Global 100, it's not the only thing, but it's one of the things that helps to give that sort of trusted mark of excellence. And it's a bit of a rarefied mark of excellence. And we don't pretend that any of the Global 100 companies have reached the sort of point of Mount Olympus where they can kind of rest on the laurels, but they're setting the evolving standard and pushing the limits of what is possible. And that's really important, not just within their own businesses, but as you and Francis are talking about, the businesses of your colleagues, and also the cabinet rooms of our governance, because when they see what is possible from leaders like Schneider Electric and HP, it makes it easier to raise the floor and bring all of society along.
Great. So Francis, I want to talk to you about circular economy. One of the things that's happening right now is that we have huge supply chain issues, trouble getting raw materials, massive investments, and how does circularity, can it help us with supply chain issues and help us be more sustainable at the same time? I know you talk a lot about circularity in HP. Maybe you could share a little bit what you guys are doing and how you see that helping drive sustainability.
Sure. Well, there's a very clear link to biodiversity loss and increasing circularity helping with fixing that problem. And it really comes back to the fact that when we dig for raw metals or oil or farming, those extractive industries, which are responsible for 100 billion tons of stuff being dug out of the earth, are responsible for 50% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions and 80% of species loss. So if we don't have to dig for more metals or oil out of the ground, and we can keep those metals and plastics in circulation for longer, we won't have those impacts. So that's where the link to circularity and biodiversity really plays in. So we're very heavily focused on, 30% post-consumer recycled plastic across our entire product portfolio by 2025. And there's no reason why any organization can't do that. We've worked with a Canadian organization called the Laverne Group to make plastics fully circular, and we can do that today. We have the technology, we just need to want to do it. And of course, procurement is a key role in that, because if you're always buying and demanding new as opposed to refurbished or recycled content, we won't ever get there. So again, why we focus so heavily on circular and sustainable procurement.
And any quick tips you can offer business leaders listening to this about how to engage with suppliers?
Sure, it's really about procurement. Procurement is a little bit where I think of IT as having been a decade ago, where IT was moving to be a very strategic piece of every business. Every company is a technology company today. Any company that's seriously looking at sustainability needs to elevate their procurement function to be a very strategic function. And that means changing the way procurement is measured away from this tyranny of the lowest price to best value, which includes looking at how many carbon emissions are embedded in that product or service that you're buying, and then what are you going to do with it when it's reached the end of its first life, hopefully give it a second life, and really thinking about durability and repairability of the things that you're bringing into your organization. So changing how procurement is viewed in an organization, how it's measured, and how transparent you are, and the metrics that you're applying to your procurement function are just critical levers to move us into this circular low carbon economy.
Thanks, Frances. And we know from some of our experiences, some was just engaging the conversation and asking, and suppliers saying, "Oh, if that's what you want, then certainly we'll look at it." So certainly starting that conversation is going to be super important to move forward. Before we get to kind of the closing here, Toby, circularity, biodiversity loss, are you starting to think about these things as some of the criteria that's going to go into considering sustainable companies for the future and your Global 100 list?
Yeah, I mean, some of the big issues coming down, biodiversity is huge. Animal welfare is another big issue. Racial diversity, pay equity between genders, another huge issue. Living wage, big issues. But these are all pretty big issues that are becoming more prominent, and the data is becoming much better. The disclosure is becoming better. Regulatory requirements are becoming much better. And I think we're going to see a lot happening on biodiversity in particular.
Great. That's good to hear. So as we come to the close of this session, I wanted to ask both of you, what do you think is the most important thing for business leaders to do to drive towards this path of net zero? And I'll start with you, Toby. What do you think is most important for business leaders?
Well, one of my favorite movies is All the President's Men with Robert Redford, Martin Sheen. And there's a famous scene in the parking lot basement with the FBI informant, otherwise known as Deep Throat, where he tells Robert Redford, follow the money, only the money. And so what that means, I think, in this context is once a company has accepted and understands the tremendous growth opportunity being a net zero solution provider, and it's part of the core strategy, then it's about the money. So let's look at the procurement budget. Is 100% of our procurement for major suppliers aligned with suppliers who are net zero aligned? We see the UK government now making that a condition of doing business with the UK government. You have to have a strong climate action plan and be net zero aligned. And then the other major one is CapEx, in R&D as well. But what percent of the CapEx is aligned? And if it's anything less than 100%, then people should be going and sharpening the pencils and getting it up to date. But it's really, at this point, if we pour money on the solutions, magic will happen.
And I think it's a great advice to the rest of the businesses out there to think of, if you want access to markets, you also need to have a sustainability strategy. Otherwise, you won't have access to those procurement markets. So now turning to you, Frances, your thoughts.
Well, leadership is really critical here, walking the talk and really giving your employees the permission to start seeking every little rock that they can lift up to start finding where the carbon savings are. And it can't be understated how important the leadership is here, that everything has to change. So you have to give your employees that permission to start working on this and to really almost put a second pair of glasses on, that instead of just looking at dollars, we're now looking at carbon. And we're not going to know where all of those savings are coming from. We're going to have to unleash the creativity of our employees. So give them permission to do that.
Great, thanks, Frances. And I'll share one of the things that we're doing at Schneider Electric, which in our recent sustainability initiative, we've defined one of those is to have local initiatives. And what we found here in Canada is our employees are really engaged. They find it a great value for them. And they also think about it when they're designing, when they're procuring, when they're engineering. So it's a great way to get the whole organization engaged, is to have some local commitments in addition to some of the large global commitments. So I'd like to thank Toby and Francis for joining me here today for this important discussion. And I want to reiterate that developing a strategy to drive towards a net zero future is a must. And regardless of where you are on that journey, we can be your partner.